Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're the place where we're really trying to crack open the stories that matter. Pulling back the curtain on these incredible journeys of some truly remarkable people. And today we're diving deep into a life that just absolutely defies conventional wisdom. It's a story so compelling. Honestly, it might just reshape how you think about success, about resilience. Just imagine for a second, someone who's maybe consistently dismissed, written off even, labeled just a woman or just a mom. Someone with no college degree, no family hookups, zero safety net, none. Now, picture that exact same person building this empire. So vast, so impactful, it spans 970 stores clear across the country, generates billions in revenue, and leads to a personal net worth of, get this, $22.3 billion. That's Diane Hendricks. It's not just astonishing, right? It's a profound statement about what's actually possible when you just refuse to be boxed in by what other people expect. So the big question we're really grappling with today, for you listening, is this.
What specific mix of mindset, those deep habits and maybe unconventional strategies, let Diane Hendricks not just defy those incredible odds, but actually rise up to become the richest self-made woman in America? And like you said, this isn't just a business story, though. I mean, that alone would be fascinating. This is really a masterclass in pure resilience and finding new ways to lead and maybe leveraging that power that comes when people underestimate you.
Exactly. And that's precisely our mission with this deep dive. We've spent a lot of time digging into a really powerful collection of sources, getting insights into Diane Hendricks' truly remarkable life. Our goal here is to pull out the most crucial bits of knowledge, those aha moments. It's not just about what she did, but really how she did it, and maybe more importantly, why her journey holds such big lessons for anyone navigating their own challenges. Whether those are personal things, professional goals, or just, the pressure society puts on you. We're going to try and unpack the key moments, those turning points, her core beliefs, and honestly, some really surprising, even audacious decisions that really shaped her path. So let's set the stage properly. Let's go right back to the beginning.
Absolutely. Yeah, to really get Diane Hendricks, you have to kind of strip away the billions, the boardrooms, all that stuff, and go right back to her roots. She wasn't born into money or fame or any kind of privilege. Not at all. Our sources, they paint this really vivid picture of her early life. On a dairy farm, deep in rural Wisconsin, one of 9 daughters. Think about that. 9 daughters in a classic blue-collar family.
Wow, 9. That's a lot of kids.
Right. Can you even imagine what that house was like? The sheer energy, the constant motion, and crucially, just the amount of work involved for a family that size running a farm. Her daily routine, it wasn't, sleeping in or after-school activities. It was defined by responsibility. Sun up to sundown. Before she even went to school, she was out in the barn milking cows. Every single morning. And then every evening, same thing. Back out there chipping in on this endless list of farm chores. It wasn't a life with luxuries. Vacations were basically unheard of. But what it did offer in spades was tough discipline, the lessons you learn from repetition, day in, day out, and this really deep, ingrained sense of responsibility.
It wasn't something you read in a book. It was just lived.
Exactly. Instilled from a super young age.
Yeah.
Became second nature. So for you listening, just think about this for a second. How could those experiences, which seem so ordinary, maybe even mundane, so far from billion-dollar deals, how could they have inadvertently built this unshakable foundation of resilience, this crazy work ethic?
Yeah, it's often in those tough, unglamorous, repetitive tasks, isn't it? Away from any spotlight, that you forge that real deep character.
Totally. That period really laid the quiet groundwork for everything that followed.
And what's really fascinating is how quickly things changed for her. Our sources talk about this sharp turn, a moment that, honestly, for most people would have just been a complete dead end, a total roadblock to any kind of, expected success story. At just 17 years old, Diane becomes a teenage mother. And this is in conservative small-town America, back when that carried a massive social stigma.
Oh, absolutely. Huge judgment.
Huge. The sources are really clear. This wasn't just a private struggle. It came with immense judgment from the community, real isolation, and this sort of unspoken but crystal clear message: your life is ruined. Your future, it's limited now.
Wow. That's heavy.
Imagine the psychological weight of that, especially for a young woman. No college, no career path, definitely no financial safety net, nothing to fall back on. It looked like her path was set, constrained. But here's where the story takes that defiant turn. Instead of just accepting that fate, accepting those limits society was trying to put on her, Diane proactively went and got her high school diploma through home study while raising her child.
That's incredible determination.
It really is. This wasn't someone stepping in and giving her a second chance. She grabbed it. She created that second chance for herself, basically through sheer willpower.
Yeah.
And if you connect that to your whole life, the super intense period early on with zero safety net, it probably forged this fierce self-reliance in her, this incredibly powerful internal drive, to prove everyone wrong.
Yeah, like an I'll show you attitude, almost.
Exactly. It instilled this deep, almost gut-level resolve that would become just a defining part of her entire career, her whole philosophy.
And that resolve, that grit, it was definitely put to the test in her early working life. Just to make ends meet. I mean, the sources say Diane wasn't afraid of any kind of work. She worked at a Parker pen factory, waited tables.
Whatever she could find, basically.
Literally whatever job she could find. These weren't, strategic career moves. They were pure survival. Balancing the needs of her kid with the tough reality of limited options. Pure necessity day in, day out. Eventually, though, in the middle of all that, she kind of finds her way into real estate. And it's really important to understand the sources don't paint it like some grand passion for property.
No, it wasn't like a dream job scenario.
Not at all. She was drawn to it because it offered, well, a few key things. Flexibility, which she needed as a young mom. The potential for commissions based on her own effort, not just an hourly wage. And maybe most importantly, it gave her a shot.
Yeah.
A real shot to earn more, to control her own destiny, even if just a little bit at first. But those early years in real estate, brutal by all accounts.
Yeah.
No mentors, zero startup cash, no guarantees.
It's just her hustling.
Right, pretty much. Every deal was a fight, every client a test. But this is exactly where she developed that thing we talked about, that our sources call grit forged through necessity. And think about what that really means day to day. She learned to solve problems constantly, on the fly, adapting, often under huge financial pressure. She got really good at communicating with all sorts of clients, understanding what they needed, negotiating deals when her own rent might depend on it.
High stakes.
Totally. She was balancing immediate survival with this kind of simmering ambition that was just starting to bubble up. Maybe not fully formed, but it was there. She wasn't dreaming of billions back then, not even close.
No way.
She was just focused on proving people wrong. One day, one deal, one sacrifice at a time. And in doing that, she was laying this incredibly strong psychological foundation for everything that came later. Every challenge she beat, every rejection she pushed through, it was like another brick in that foundation.
Yeah, you can see how those seemingly small wins, that constant grind, really built something powerful.
Exactly. The future titan of industry was being forged right there, quietly, in the trenches.
Which brings us to a really key moment, doesn't it? That shift from her own individual struggle to something collaborative, a breakthrough. And Diane's big breakthrough, it didn't come from the usual places, Silicon Valley, venture capital, Wall Street deals. Nope. It came kind of unexpectedly from the roofing business. Pretty unglamorous.
Right. Not exactly tech startup territory.
Not at all. It came from meeting Ken Hendricks, a guy who really shared her intensity, her grit, and that vision she was starting to form. Ken, like Diane, he wasn't exactly conventional either. High school dropout, but he'd successfully built himself up into a respected roofing contractor. And Diane, as we just heard, was this self-taught, tough-as-nails real estate broker.
So different worlds, but maybe similar mindsets.
Exactly. And what's really interesting if you connect the dots is how their backgrounds, seemingly different, actually complemented each other perfectly. Diane knew the broader real estate market, property dynamics, what homeowners and developers needed. Ken, though, he had that deep first-hand knowledge of the roofing industry itself. The specific pain points, the inefficiencies, the daily frustrations contractors faced.
Ah, so they had both sides covered.
Pretty much. Together, their combined experience gave them this unique viewpoint. It let them spot this huge market opportunity that, amazingly, almost nobody else seemed to see, or maybe just didn't care about. The roofing industry back then was super fragmented, incredibly inefficient, and basically ignored by the big suppliers who were chasing bigger fish.
Okay, so that's the gap they saw, and that's where their simple but revolutionary idea came in, right? Back in '82. They co-founded ABC Supply with this vision that, on the surface seems pretty straightforward. Let's build a nationwide chain, make it easier for roofers, builders to get good materials, fast, fair prices.
Simple, right.
Seems simple now, but you got to ask, why was that so revolutionary back then? What was so groundbreaking about just making things easier and fairer?
Well, think about the context. The big suppliers, the established players, they were often focused on huge commercial projects. Or they just weren't prioritizing the needs of the individual roofers, the smaller independent guys.
Right, the bread and butter guys were getting overlooked.
Just totally overlooked, which meant that this sort of unglamorous but absolutely essential part of the construction world was just ripe for disruption. Contractors working on tight schedules, tight margins.
Always under pressure.
Always. They were constantly dealing with maddening delays, getting materials, prices that seemed to change constantly, just making it hard to source quality stuff efficiently. All that stuff directly hit their bottom line, their reputation, their ability to just stay in business.
So Ken and Diane didn't just see a business niche. They saw a real problem to solve for these contractors.
Exactly. They stepped in to fix those everyday headaches. They were willing to focus relentlessly on just fundamental, reliable service in an industry that desperately needed it. It shows that sometimes the biggest innovations aren't flashy tech, right? They're about deeply understanding and fixing basic, overlooked problems for a specific group of people who are being ignored.
It wasn't about reinventing roofing supplies.
No, it was about making sure the supply chain worked smoothly, reliably, every single time for their customers. That was the revolution.
And they really did build it from the ground up. Started incredibly small, didn't they? Which is kind of amazing considering where it ended up.
Oh, absolutely. The sources really detail those humble beginnings. One store, a handful of employees, and this shared obsession with service. It wasn't like they were managing from afar.
No ivory tower stuff.
No way. It was intensely personal, super hands-on, a philosophy that really stuck with them, even as they grew massive. Diane wasn't just delegating. She was right there, handling admin, managing customer relationships, helping out in the warehouse, on the sales floor.
And Ken was out in the field.
Ken was out there constantly talking to contractors, understanding what they needed on the ground, building those relationships based on trust and just showing up.
Yeah.
Their dedication was, well, relentless, almost fanatical, some sources say. In those early years, they weren't just sending emails. They were driving across state lines themselves, visiting clients in person, really studying what contractors needed, tweaking every little detail.
Like what kind of details?
Everything. Delivery speed, how can we get it there faster? Credit policies, how can we make them fair and transparent? This super granular, obsessive focus on the customer's reality, it built something crucial in that tough construction world. Trust.
Which is everything in that business, right? Deadlines and dependability.
Exactly. ADC Supply quickly became, as one source put it, more than a vendor. It became a partner in survival. This deep understanding of their customers' daily grind, plus their absolute commitment to deliver, it laid this unshakable foundation, absolutely critical for the growth that came next.
And they definitely did grow.
Yeah.
But like you said, it wasn't just random. It seems like the growth at ABC Supply was this masterclass in careful, deliberate, really intentional scaling. They started with the one store, nailed the model, then carefully opened 5 more, then 20. It wasn't reckless.
No, very strategic. Considered.
Right. By the mid-90s, ABC Supply already had this strong multi-state presence.
Yeah.
Just steadily building the network, one loyal customer, one dedicated employee at a time. And by the early 2000s, it wasn't just a growing player anymore. It was undeniably a dominant force in the whole industry. And what's really amazing here, what the sources keep pointing out, is Diane's key role, maybe sometimes overlooked, in actually engineering a scalable system in what they call one of America's least glamorous but most essential sectors, construction supply.
Yeah, it's not sexy, but it's vital.
Totally. This wasn't about flashy apps or chasing trends. It was the nitty-gritty. Logistics, inventory management, supply chains, operational excellence across hundreds of locations. That's the unglamorous backbone of construction.
And doing that consistently across hundreds of places is incredibly hard.
Incredibly hard.
Yeah.
It required this deep understanding of how to replicate success, how to standardize the important stuff, but still empower local managers to adapt. It just reinforces that theme, right? Behind every expansion, every new branch, every strategic move, building this massive company.
It was the same woman.
It was the same woman they once dismissed as just a mom. That just a woman was building the foundation of a multi-billion-dollar empire. Not with inherited wealth, not with connections, but with pure will, hard work, and just an incredible understanding of her market.
Okay. So as we move forward in this incredible story, we hit a really profound challenge, a true test, a crucible moment that threatened everything she'd built, every bit of belief she had. In 2007, tragedy just strikes. Out of the blue, Ken Hendricks, her husband, her business partner, the co-founder, really the heart of ABC Supply, he died suddenly, fell at their home.
Oh my gosh. Devastating.
Utterly devastating. And overnight, Diane is left completely alone at the helm. Think about that. It wasn't just the crushing grief of losing her life partner.
Which is unimaginable in its...
Unimaginable, but it was also the staggering, almost unbearable burden of suddenly being the sole leader of this huge, sprawling construction supply empire. The company was already massive then, over 400 stores, thousands of employees counting on its stability, millions in daily transactions. The sources call the weight crushing. Personal sorrow mixed with the very real threat of the whole thing collapsing. She wasn't just mourning, she was facing this unprecedented crisis with the future of the whole company, thousands of livelihoods resting squarely on her shoulders.
That's immense pressure. Most people would buckle.
Absolutely. And then, as if that wasn't enough, just a year later, boom, the 2008 financial crisis hits the entire world.
The perfect storm.
Literally the definition of a perfect storm for Diane and ABC Supply. Housing market implodes, construction just grinds to a halt everywhere, credit markets freeze up. Even solid companies couldn't get loans.
Yeah, I remember that time.
Yeah.
Brutal.
Brutal. And most companies in her industry did exactly what you'd expect facing that kind of threat. They downsized like crazy. Layoffs, selling assets, desperately cutting back. Many, sadly, just didn't make it. Folded completely. Vanished.
So you'd think, right, given the immense personal tragedy she's still dealing with, plus this global economic meltdown, you'd think Diane would play it safe.
Consolidate, right.
Might you retreat a bit, or just try to ride it out, a hope to survive. But she didn't do that. In fact, what she did next wasn't just daring. It was, well, it was pretty much unthinkable in that environment. It completely defied what almost any other leader would have done in her shoes.
It really did. In the absolute depths of that crisis, when fear was just gripping everything, Diane Hendricks made this incredibly audacious power move. Still talked about today. ABC Supply acquired its biggest rival, L&W Supply, for $670 million.
Wow. In the middle of the crash, $670 million.
In the middle of the meltdown. This wasn't just a big acquisition. It was this huge, defiant statement. As the sources say, this wasn't a safe bet. It was a power move. She literally doubled down when everyone else retreated.
That takes unbelievable nerve.
Unbelievable courage, foresight, sheer nerve. Think about it. While everyone else is hunkering down, laying people off, freezing everything, Diane's writing checks for hundreds of millions to grow her empire aggressively.
What does that tell you about her? Her understanding of the market, maybe.
Maybe she sensed those distressed assets were undervalued. Or maybe she just had this unshakable belief that the downturn, however bad, would end eventually, and the strongest would come out even stronger.
Or just total belief in her own company's strength.
That too. An innate, gut-level belief in ABC's fundamentals, even when everything looked chaotic. She didn't just survive the crisis, she saw it as this unique chance to cement ABC's dominance. A bold bet against fear.
And looking back, it seems like genius, but at the time?
At the time, it was a massive gamble. Epic proportions. But maybe one only she was positioned, or maybe temperamentally suited, to take.
And that gamble, that audacious move, it paid off. Big time. That huge acquisition didn't just expand ABC's footprint, adding hundreds of new locations. It decisively positioned them as the undisputed leader, the dominant player in building material distribution. It's like a textbook example of strategic countercyclical investing.
Buying when there's blood in the streets, essentially.
Exactly. Buying aggressively when everyone else was panicking or selling. While competitors were playing desperate defense, just trying to survive, shedding assets, cutting costs, Diane Hendricks was playing offense, expanding reach, consolidating market share.
She didn't just survive the crisis.
She emerged stronger, richer, way more respected than ever, cemented her reputation as this visionary leader. And let's just look at the numbers again because they're staggering. By 2020, ABC Supply passes $15 billion in annual revenue.
15?
And by 2024, over $20.7 billion. More than 970 stores across America. Diane's personal net worth, $22.3 billion. Richest self-made woman in the U.S.
Wow.
So for you listening, after hearing that, what does crisis as leverage really mean? It's not just a theory, right? It means when most people see roadblocks and reasons to run, a few rare people like Diane Hendricks see opportunity
Yeah.
real opportunity for growth. She just embodies that principle.
And moving beyond those huge strategic moves and the incredible numbers, it's really crucial to understand the underlying principles, what sustained that growth, what created that culture of loyalty they have. Our sources really emphasize this core part of her leadership. Diane Hendricks doesn't just run a company, she sets a culture, long before company culture became this big buzzword.
Right before everyone had ping pong tables.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Diane seemed to intuitively grasp this simple but really powerful truth. It became the backbone of ABC's employee-first philosophy. If you take care of your people, they'll take care of your business. Simple to say.
Much harder to actually do consistently.
Much harder. But for her, it seems it was fundamental.
Yeah, it wasn't just a slogan for the website or the annual report. It really was and is the operational philosophy driving everything at ABC Supply.
Right.
And unlike so many big companies focused on quarterly results, stock prices, distant shareholders, Diane Hendricks' focus stays on the front line.
The actual people doing the work.
The actual people in the warehouses, loading the trucks in all weather, the folks behind the counters helping customers, the people who are literally the gears making the whole complex thing run. She deliberately set up programs that reward loyalty. Not just lip service, but tangible recognition and compensation for people who stick around. She prioritized promoting from within, not just as a policy, but as a real practice.
So people could see a path forward.
Exactly. A new hire in the warehouse could actually see a path to management, maybe even beyond, knowing their hard work would be noticed and rewarded. And here's a really key part that challenges typical corporate structure: branch autonomy.
Right, empowering the local managers.
Massively. Store managers are trusted to lead like entrepreneurs, not just employees taking orders from HQ. Think about the psychological impact of that. It creates ownership, sparks creative problem solving, builds responsibility because their decisions matter locally.
It's a powerful bottom-up approach, really. Distributed leadership.
Totally. Proving it can be incredibly effective, even at that scale.
And that hands-on personal approach is so important. It really sets Diane apart from most CEOs running companies that size. The sources are crystal clear. She is definitely not a distant CEO. She makes it a priority, like a non-negotiable part of her routine, to personally visit stores all over the country. And she doesn't just do a quick walkthrough.
No drive-by leadership.
No. She walks the yards, watches operations, and crucially, she takes time to stop and talk to team members at every level. And here's the really telling detail, the kind that says so much. Longtime employees genuinely report, almost with surprise, that she remembers their names, their stories, even details about their families.
That's amazing at that scale, remembering names and family details.
Right, that kind of personal leadership, that genuine connection, it builds something you just can't buy. Real, deep loyalty. It creates an environment where people don't feel like cogs. They feel seen, valued, cared for as individuals.
Which explains why they consistently rank as a great place to work, even in a tough industry.
Absolutely. Despite being in the gritty, demanding world of construction supply, her philosophy seems profoundly simple but powerful. If you want a $22 billion company, start by building trust. One employee, one conversation, one act of caring at a time. It really challenges that top-down command and control idea of leadership.
Yeah, she shows that real leadership is built on presence, empathy, and genuine connection.
Reciprocal connection.
Okay, so we've talked about the incredible business success, the $22.3 billion net worth, 970 stores, $20 billion plus in revenue. Huge numbers. But as our sources keep saying, there's a deeper story than just the money. It's a story about legacy, responsibility, and giving back. Specifically, giving back to the place where it all started for her. Diane Hendricks never forgot her roots. Beloit, Wisconsin. That struggling hometown where she grew up milking cows, doing hard labor, seeing neighbors struggle.
And what's really interesting is where she chose to invest that wealth. So many billionaires put their money into distant ventures, tech hubs, global things.
Or just luxury assets,
Right.
Yachts and islands.
Right. Diane made a different choice, a deeply personal one. She chose to reinvest massively directly in her own community. She literally bought up dozens of rundown, neglected buildings in downtown Beloit, painstakingly turning them from eyesores into assets.
So not just donations, but active redevelopment.
Active redevelopment, revitalizing schools, funding community centers, even helping build a new baseball stadium. All with this clear goal: bring jobs, civic pride, hope back to the city she calls home. It became known as betting on Beloit.
And it worked, right? It transformed the town.
By all accounts, yes. Transformed it from being called, controversially, the worst place to live into a real model of small-town resurgence. And here's the key thing about her philanthropy. She didn't seem to do it for headlines or praise. Most of these projects flew completely under the radar.
Until the results just spoke for themselves. Quiet impact.
Exactly. Quiet, impactful, deeply rooted work. And what's really compelling isn't just the sale, but the type of philanthropy. The sources mention her quiet, steady support for fundamental things: education, vocational training, veterans' causes. But it's important to stress this isn't just about writing checks. She focuses on creating real infrastructure that lasts. Tangible assets, schools, training centers, community hubs that can support the community for generations.
So it's just a scholarship.
She might help build a whole new vocational school wing that trains hundreds of people every year for decades, creating this ongoing pipeline of skills and opportunity.
That's a different level of impact. Systemic.
Systemic is a good word. And if you connect that to her whole life, it raises this really important question for you, the listener. What does it actually mean for wealth to be amplification? Using what you've earned to lift others up in a lasting way. Diane Hendricks really exemplifies that. From that teenage mom on a farm, fighting judgment, proving her worth, to becoming the richest self-made woman in America and then choosing to transform her struggling hometown. She built way more than just a company.
Yeah, she built a real legacy. Tangible, lasting, about community and upliftment. It shows wealth isn't just personal achievement. It can be this powerful tool for positive change. What an incredible story. Just layers upon layers. So if we try to distill the core lessons from Diane Hendricks' journey, it really does feel like a practical blueprint for self-made greatness, especially in a world that often dismisses people who don't fit the mold. First big takeaway: you absolutely do not need permission to start. Diane didn't wait for a fancy degree or the perfect mentor or the right economic conditions. She just started with what she had: grit, hunger, and that deep sense of responsibility.
Yeah, your current circumstances might be your fuel.
Exactly. They might be the very thing that drives you. Second lesson, and this one's huge: crisis can be your greatest leverage. Most people shrink in tough times. They pull back, play it safe. Diane, facing unimaginable loss and the worst recession in generations, she expanded.
That L&W acquisition was unbelievable timing.
Unbelievable. In the middle of the meltdown, she makes this massive bet that transforms her company and the entire industry. The lesson: don't just survive chaos. Own it. Lean into it. Look for the chances everyone else is too scared to see. Third, and this feels really human, real leadership is built from the ground up, not just dictated. Her huge empire wasn't held together by slogans or rigid hierarchies. It was forged by trust, respect, and her being present.
Knowing her people.
Knowing them, visiting stores, understanding challenges, empowering them. If you want loyalty, lead like you actually care about them as people, not just command them. And finally, maybe the deepest truth: legacy is bigger than just wealth. With $22.3 billion, she could have easily just retired, vanished onto a yacht. But she chose to rebuild Beloit, her hometown.
Pouring herself back into it.
Exactly. Real success, the kind that lasts, isn't just measured by what you earn. It's defined by what you return to your community, your people, the world.
So the next time someone tells you you can't, or you face a challenge that just feels overwhelming, or someone tries to put you in a box based on your background, yeah, definitely think about Diane Hendricks.
Remember the labels.
Remember those labels?
Yeah.
The teenage mom, the farm girl, just a woman. That's how she was seen, dismissed. And then remember this: that same woman, underestimated, now owns 970 stores, commands a personal fortune of $22.3 billion. She didn't just break the mold they tried to put her in.
She became the blueprint.
She became the blueprint for what's possible when that grit meets real vision. You don't have to be born rich to become rich. You just need the mindset, maybe some audacious moves, and that unwavering courage to just keep going. Even, and maybe especially, when they say, you're just...
So the question for you is, what will you do with that quiet conviction?